You are watching or listening to Purham and Associates. For more information, go to rpurham.com or follow me on all social media platforms and subscribe at RPURHAM. Thanks. See you over there. Hey, good day to you all. Welcome to Purham and Associates. I'm your host, Randy Purham. Hey, y'all know what time it is. It is Friday. This is the day, this is the time and day that we take to thank our men and women who are serving our nation around the world, sacrificing and committing their time and freedoms in serving our nation, our country, and our way of life. We thank you and we salute you and we wish you a safe journey back home to your friends, family, and loved ones, wherever they may be. With that being said, that was a mouthful. Hey, we got a very special guest with us today. Returning guest, y'all know who she is, though. But we're going to get into some things today about government. But we have none other than Mandy Gunasekara. She is the author of Y'all Fight, a Southern Belle's Guide to Restoring Federalism and Draining the Swamp. She has been at the center of the U.S. energy and environmental policy for the last decade. From the Senate cloakroom to the Oval Office, she's a veteran environmental attorney, energy strategist, and communicator. She served President Trump as the chief of staff at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. Currently, she's a visiting fellow at the Heritage Foundation and lives with her husband and children in Oxford, Mississippi. Ladies and gentlemen, introduce herself, presenting to others, Mandy Gunasekara. Welcome back, Mandy. How you been?
I'm good, Randy. It's great to be back with you, and been busy doing lots of things.
Yeah. Give us an update as to what you've been up to the last few months.
Yeah, well, my biggest news is I had a baby, and so I took a little bit of time to her, but then obviously stay on top of what's been going on in DC. I took my first trip to DC earlier this week. And it was actually great timing. It was the night before, or the morning before, they ended up voting, House voting on the reopening the government package. Thank goodness. The longest ever shutdown is really it's inexcusable, and the obstinance from the Democrat Party. This is what they do when they prioritize politics over the well-being of the people that they are supposed to be representing in Washington, D.C. So making the rounds, working on a couple of regulatory issues, and then staying on top of the International Climate Conference that's been going on in Brazil this week. And the U.S. government, thankfully, did not send a delegation. This is what I've been a part of in the past, and it was a big waste of time, energy, and resources, because it's just a lot of people that hate what the United States stands for, hates a capitalist society, and wants to yell at the United States for our successes instead of talking constructively about ways to grow economies, improve environmental impacts, and help lift up people.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and thank you for pointing that out, because the climate initiative, I'm not gonna say it's a waste, a complete waste, but it's a majority waste. you know, and
Yeah.
people are not understanding. I had a debate a few weeks back on Threads of all places. Somebody was like, "You don't believe in climate change?" And I said, "I believe in the naturalization of the climate shifting, and that there's nothing changed." I said, "Well, when was the last time that you went?" The basis was about Texas weather and how
Yeah.
the storms and stuff are coming in and everything else. And I said, it's no different than what happened back in the 90s. Like, what are you talking about? So,
Yeah.
the whole climate argument, it's been just like, it's been comedy by itself. And I just tell people, I say, you know what? When you think about looking at the history of the climate change discussion, in the 60s, 70s window, it was global cooling, and then it went to global warming, and then it went to the greenhouse gases, and then now it's like, oh, screw it. We don't know what to call it, so it's just climate change. And it's like, thanks.
Right.
So, but anyways, the government shutdown is finally coming to an end, and, well, has ended officially. And you were there in D.C. For that. What was the atmosphere in DC when all that went down?
Well, it's interesting. So if you were in the House of Representatives on the floor, I missed the Senate vote. So I came in right after the Senate vote and before the House vote. And so the city itself, and when I say city, what I'm talking about is where I go when I'm in DC, which is mostly Capitol Hill, in this neighborhood right next to Capitol Hill called Navy Yard. It was pretty dead. And actually every single Uber driver I had a couple of Uber drivers. They were really interesting. They were very well informed. They were all immigrants. They all voted for President Trump, and they were so frustrated by the shutdown. They understood that it was the Democrats playing politics. They were concerned about healthcare. I talked extensively about healthcare with them, but they talked about how the shutdown made it almost difficult for them to be able to keep their cars, to make their payments, the insurance, the gas, all the costs that they have to do just to be able to provide driving services in and around Capitol Hill. So the government shutdown, it obviously impacted people working directly for the federal government, but for a lot of the service industries that pop up around Capitol Hill and other federal places, whether it's the drivers, the coffee shops, the food places, they too were suffering. And so they were relieved that was happening. So that was the atmosphere outside of the floor. On the floor, obviously, it was a little frenetic, if you will. The Democrats are, they're going in, kicking and screaming, really. And you had the Republicans that wanted to get the government back up and running, and then to have that serious conversation about issues that Democrats suddenly raised as the biggest issue that they ever cared about, which was healthcare and the problems we know have been created as a manifestation of Obamacare, another Democrat gift, if you will, that has produced all sorts of consequences. So it was really quiet in Washington, D.C., which was different than what folks were watching on TV when they were doing the votes. And then Thursday, after the vote, that's considered a flyout day when all the members Washington, D.C. go back home to do district work. And so it was pretty empty all around D.C. But I tell you what, Monday, I think it's going to be a frenzy. From Monday until they finish up the business for the end of this year, I think it's going to be pretty crazy.
Yeah, I look forward to Monday for them, because I know it is going to be a frenzy. You're right, because they have several bills on deck that they're going to tackle next week. But the backlash that the Democrats are now seeing behind the government shutdown, it was like, wait, you mean to tell me you held us hostage for the proverbial 40 days, 40 nights, but it was 43. But you held us hostage, and in the name of trying to fight for health care and all this. But then you end up just capitulating, realizing that you're not going to get what you want. But you agreed to the exact same terms and conditions that was set forth on day one. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
And so, I want to get your thoughts on a prediction rather. What do you see happening to the Democrats going forward in January when they have to come back to the table again to do the CR all over again?
I I don't think that they will want to play games with it again. I mean, honestly, I think this was a political play and they got what they wanted in that sense. They wanted to motivate their base to really turn out for Virginia and New Jersey, deep blue states that they were actually worried about. I think everyone's lost of that after Democrats ultimately prevailed in these deep blue states where they had to spend a lot of money and they basically had to come up with a reason to justify or to motivate their base to really come out, and that was the shutdown. The Democrats are good at concocting those sorts of motivating scenarios for their base leading up to elections. And so that's really what I think this was at the end of the day. So all that going forward, I mean, they definitely have egg on their face. The same deal that was offered on day one. I think a lot of people outside of DC see through the political games that the Democrats have been playing. And then also the point that I think Republicans made repeatedly and is very important. It was, we want to talk about healthcare. We've been wanting to talk about healthcare for a long time, but you shouldn't hold the government hostage to have a policy or a tax discussion that we can have in other policy contexts that make so much more sense, whether it's the appropriations bills, whether it's separate votes, or whether it is through the committee process. And so I think Republicans were really good in being honest on the messaging side of wanting to have that conversation, but this wasn't the right time and place. Now, that being said, I don't foresee the Democrats putting up a big fight again at the end of January. I think they'll want people to forget it. They have the media already trying to distract the American public away from the consequences of the shutdown, the affordability issue, and yeah, we've got the Epstein, and so they're once again doing what they do when they're backed up in a corner, which is try to distract people so they can get out of the bad political.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right about that. And the funny thing about the Epstein files debacle is there's partly a very high probability, because I mean the files have been released and trickled out anyways over the years, so it's like how much of a file, quote unquote, is there, but the ones that have been released and everything else, you see that you see the involvement with President Trump in it, and it's kind of like minuscule to non-existent. And then there's the other names that are involved in it. I keep telling people, I'm like, at the end of the day, Epstein was a Democrat elite. I have not yet really seen any Republicans, old or new, on the list of people that there's been mentioned. It's mostly been all Democrats. So if they really want the files released, there'll probably be like some current Democrats that's going to be on that list. So it's kind of like, do y'all really want this out there? Or I don't know. But anyways, I want to get into the you mentioned something very very important: healthcare. I'm of the position that healthcare is not the business of the government at the end of the day, and that should be a state-ran issue at very most, but that should be more so an individual to a patient to doctor issue. And the doctor, it should go back to the way it was back in the early days, of our country, where a doctor go to school, get their craft, get their trade, get their license, and you need services, come, let's talk, let's do a contract type of thing. I'm of that flavor. You should go out and pick out the doctors that you need, work up the contracts and everything else, the terms and conditions of service. The doctors then, in turn, work with hospitals and say, hey, I got some patients. You're an establishment that has a larger, care facility type of situation going on, better equipment. I contract with you to, service my patients. Government's not involved. Costs are low because there's competition in the market now and everything else. Why can't we get back to that? Why is it that we have to have the government intervening in this business? Your thoughts, ma'am?
That's a really good question. And that was the design of Obamacare. The design of Obamacare was to create the failure of private sector or employee-based and private access to healthcare, for that to fail because of cost overruns and the complexities around insurance companies, that everyone would get on this government, a single payer government run healthcare system. So all this is happening by exact and strategic design of Obamacare. Now, how do we get out of it is we do away with that whole system. And the problem that Republicans have had is they haven't come up with a holistic replacement. They really haven't come up. They've tried to fix things here and there. I'm of the opinion, the same opinion as you. First of all, the shouldn't be as involved in it. Take, for example, LASIK eye surgery. It's the cost that used to be really expensive that now is very affordable. And the reason is because no one from the government ever decided to make it cheaper and accessible to everyone. And so it's been a reflection of the market instead of the government coming in, bringing in the bureaucracy, bringing in the insurance companies that just massively inflate costs and do away with the patient being able to talk to the doctor to understand the care, the cost, the options, and then actually paying for it in a timely manner. I mean, I just had a baby, and I feel like every other week I get a $5,000 bill here, a $5,000 bill here, and as someone going in, I have no idea who am I paying for what exact services. And they send you these sheets that are supposed to explain your coverage explanation or benefits explanation, but it doesn't make sense to me because I don't speak the language of insurance companies and the hospital codes or whatnot. So to everything, getting rid of it, it's going to require exacting a couple pounds of flesh from the political element, and that is always very, very hard. There's massive lobby groups protecting the current status quo, and the beneficiaries that are making bank with the current structure, you're going to be up against them. But I do think it's time for us to get back to how healthcare used to be, and it used to be about the patient and the doctor. It wasn't about access to benefits provided for in part by various insurance companies. It was none of that. It was very straightforward, and it was actually quite good.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And last night I was at a candidate forum, and we actually had this discussion very briefly, though. But one of the members in the audience that was attending there, they brought up the fact of how the patient should be able to actually, I'm sorry, it wasn't even a member of the audience. It was one of the candidates. The candidates talked about how they should have an a la carte system, because not everybody needs to be on the same kind of plans and what have you. You should be able to select what type of services benefits you or your family, and you pay for that. And versus, you have to pay this premium for all these things that you likely won't use. And so I thought that was a very salient point. And maybe the government needs to look at just turn off Obamacare altogether. Just turn it off and just say, all right, folks, y'all figure it out. Have a great day. And, and yeah, it'll be like chaos in the streets for a little bit, but people will figure it out. That's our motto. We figure it out. And so I want to turn to federalism, and I want to get you to. Well, I ask you to explain what federalism is and how this all relates to all of that good stuff.
Yeah, well, the idea of federalism is embedded in our founding documents, and it was this concept that the states would be more powerful from a direct representation of the people as well as resources. They would be more powerful compared to the centralized federal government that is in Washington, D.C. And so what it requires is it's a lot of responsibility that falls to the states. But over time, we have lost sight of that and slowly but surely leaned on, and now it serves as a crutch the federal government to take care of so many of the state's needs. And one of the things I talk about this in my book, one of the things that eroded, well, two big decisions that eroded that delicate balance between the states having the upper hand over the federal government was the passage of the 16th Amendment, which was the establishment of income tax that took a lot of dollars away from the states and flooded the system in Washington, D.C. The other piece is the passage of the 17th Amendment. And this is how we elect our senators. Senators were originally intended to be represented by the state legislative bodies to truly represent the state's interest first and to be constitutional hawks from that position that the states have the upper hand compared to the federal government. When they did away with how you elect senators and they just became, another direct elect subject to the whims and the politics of the people, which is how the House was designed. It just brought them into equilibrium in some ways. There's process that sets away the Senate, but nonetheless, equilibrium and how they're elected. And so you have a lesser caliber of candidate, frankly, that's in the Senate. A lot of them don't even understand that they are supposed to be representing their state's interests consistent with the Constitution, and they just become another part of a longer term political cycle. And so that has slowly but surely eroded this careful design of federalism, whereby the state should have more authority and responsibility and resources. It's kind of flipped on its head to where now most of that authority, that expectation of responsibility by the people and the resources come from Washington, D.C., which creates all these problems where you have these top-down directives that don't really work. What works for Minnesota doesn't work for Mississippi, and there's so many other examples I can cite for that.
You're absolutely right, and thank you for giving us the explanation behind it, because that's a term that a lot of people don't hear these days. They don't even know. I'm not going to insult people's intelligence, but a lot of people don't know what federalism is. You know, they were like, you say that, you walk around, you go outside your house right now, and you just say, hey, we need to get back to federalism. They'd be like, what? You know, and so hey, try it. It works. I do it all the time.
Randy, I'm thinking I've got young kids. You know, 6-7 has taken off. I think if 6-7 could take off to where people understand it, we could do the same thing with federalism. We just need a good TikTok video.
Yeah, TikTok. Yeah, exactly. And you know, folks, the idea that, you know, because this kind of goes back to the 10th Amendment and Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. If it does not comport to Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, then it's the state's responsibility. And then people, I've held arguments with people who would say, well, you know, let's not forget that, you know, the necessary and proper clause to expand on the provisions within Section 8. I absolutely 100% agree. Because as times change and conditions change and what have you, you need legislation to support what it is that you need to be doing. I get that. However, the expectancy or the thought that it's okay to expand government through Section 8 of Article 1 by creating additional agencies to support these things, that's where I have a problem, because it's like, no, we don't need all these agencies. We need to delegate that responsibility to the states. And then the states can work with the government and say, hey, we're having a shortfall here. Can you provide some assistance? Get it. Totally okay with that. No problem. However, abolishing the 16th Amendment in my purview is something that we need to push for. Because once you get rid of the income tax system, then now it forces the government to actually have a balanced budget amendment and say, okay, we only got so much money coming in. So all you other yahoos, and I thought this was going to happen actually during the shutdown. I actually thought that the administration would say, okay, this is the perfect time to eliminate half of the government, or keep the government keep it closed for, you know, the duration of the presidency. and just say, let's see what happens. Let's maybe we'll get back to a sense of what constitutionally the government should be doing. Because if you eliminate all that fat and waste, and the Congress could come in and say, okay, we'll provide funding for this. They could do a single issue bill and provide funding for certain things. And I'm surprised that they didn't take advantage of that. So it's just interesting to me. Um, your book, Southern Belle's Guide to Restoring Federalism, as we just discussed, and Draining the Swamp, which they had a chance to do, but they screwed it up. So, Mandy, tell us about the book and what like motivated you to write it.
Yeah, so there's three main sections of the book I would describe. The first is my experience with the deep state, which is pretty awful. That's actually what motivated me to write the book, because I couldn't believe these things were happening to me. And it wasn't just to me. Whether it was frivolous, anonymous investigations that result in tens of thousands of attorneys' bills, that's part of how the left will use various investigatory bodies to go after Republicans and people who support President Trump, that, or harassment, like when I went to represent the president at a UN conference, the State Department put me up in a seedy sex hotel 45 minutes away from where the actual negotiations went. They would pull out all the stops, not just to prevent the president's policies from being done, but to demean, demoralize, and discredit we the people for him. First part of the book. The second part, it's a deep dive. It's for the wonks out there, and it gets into what I was just referencing. How did we get to this point where you had the founders' careful balance between states and the federal seat of power in Washington, D.C.? It's eroded over time. What has led to that? The passage of the 16th, 17th Amendment, the growth of the New Deal era, where people started looking to the government for help, and then just the proliferation of the trust the experts that came to a crashing halt during the COVID era, but nonetheless, describe how did we get from point A to point B. The last part of the book is the best part. It's what do we do about it? And the reason I'm so excited about it is a lot of these ideas and policies were embraced by the Department of Government Efficiency, doing first an audit to understand the scope of waste, fraud, and abuse throughout the various agencies. That was a really important and almost impossible step, but for someone like Elon Musk and his team coming on board and shaping that and figuring it out and then conveying it to the public in a way that anyone can understand. So that was a really big part. And then the second piece of it is implementing policies that President Trump's cabinet members are busy doing, shutting down offices that don't contribute to the actual mission of the agency, getting rid of superfluous or duplicative positions, reducing politicization in various offices, and restoring accountability and merit-based decisions and the hiring process. The only thing they haven't done, I want them to do, is start thinking about how they can shift some of these DC-based operations to other parts of the United States. Yeah. I think there's a lot of benefit in the pool, shifting the geographic location, and then also an accountability element, divide it up so that it's not as centralized, as forceful, and as oppressive as it historically has been.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. That is just the idea. That was the I guess you say the initial intent of the federal government, is to have decentralized power amongst itself to the states, and say, okay, hey, you got a Bureau of Agriculture, down the street from you, go ahead and, if you're having a shortfall, if you're having an issue that requires government assistance or governmental guidance, there you go. You don't have to fly to DC. You don't have to do a Zoom call with DC. You can just go right down the street and have that, interpersonal communication, problem solved, and move on. That was the initial intent. Now, like you just said, everything is like centralized and compacted in DC. You can't get around it down there. You can't park anywhere. It's like, what's going on. So it's a forced economic engine of spending money to keep the money in DC. And I recognized that years ago, and I lived in the DMV area. And I said, every time I go down here to DC, I spend more money than I intended to just on parking.
Yeah,
Just on parking
that's
the
true.
travel, the travel to, wherever building I'm going to, because I have to park 6 blocks away, get an Uber or a cab, to the building, and then vice versa. So it's like, I shouldn't have to spend money doing all that. But it is what it is. But Mandy, tell people how they can follow you, support you, and all that good stuff.
Yeah, the best way to follow me is on X at Mississippi MG. You can also check me out on Truth at Mandy Gunasekara. I have a website, mandy.ms. I put out a memo every Friday called the Mandy Memo, which is a recap of media hits I've done, like this one. I'll put on it, as well as some of the top stories of the week that I think folks should be paying attention to. So those are the best ways. And if you're interested in buying my book, you can check it out on either Amazon or Barnes & Noble.
Awesome. What was the website again?
Mandy.ms.
Mandy.ms. Awesome. Mandy, thank you so much for being here today. I love talking to you, because you bring such great insight and energy to what you're doing, and I truly appreciate it. More than happy to have you back on anytime. So be safe out there. Enjoy the baby. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I am way past. I'm on grandkids now, so I know. Mine is optional to come and destroy the house and I kick them out. So you're permanent with that. So,
It's true.
Enjoy.
Thank you.
Once again, no problem. Take care. God bless. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Randy.
Absolutely, ladies and gentlemen. Mandy Gunasekara. Mandy.ms, the website. Once again, Mandy.ms. You can go there and get a repository of her work. Order the book. I highly recommend checking out the book. Get it. Go ahead and get that. And for those that need to see the cover again, it's Y'all Are Fired: A Southern Belle's Guide to Restoring Federalism, the Swamp. And folks, with that being said, I'm going to jump up out of here, and I will catch you all later. Have a fantastic Friday and a wonderful weekend, and y'all be safe, and see y'all next week sometime. Ciao. I hope you enjoyed today's program. You can follow, like, share, subscribe on Spotify, Substack, Rumble, YouTube, Facebook, and your news. And also, you can download Let the Truth Be Told app on your favorite streaming platforms, such as Fire Stick, Apple TV, and Roku. Take care. God bless.